And then we'll just do a hard cut straight to my face. Yet again, the hard cut. Hello, and welcome to another stream, I suppose. Yet again, another one. I have been streaming for over 24 hours, not consecutively, but over the past 28 days. A lot of work, a lot to do. Hello, my friends are here to hang out. I hope you liked that song that was playing just a little bit ago. I made that one as well. All of the music I use on my channel, I made myself, which I think is fun. But today, we are talking about the genealogy of ancient elves. Going once again into the Bible to study really, really old storytelling techniques, because that's how you stay relevant, modern. I don't know. Apparently the Bible, maybe you've heard of it, pretty popular book from what I gather. So far, it's been an interesting story. The observable universe was created, and then there was a demigod project, and that didn't work out very well. There was an eviction. It may or may not have coincided with the establishment of a self-propagating human who multiplied with the acquisition of fruit. A lot of interesting things, and along the way, some artifacts of misogyny, as you might expect from a very old text. A lot of that leading up to recently, of course. That's a whole thing, unfortunately. All that to say, welcome and thank you for existing. Glad to be here with you. Today we're going to get into chapter 4 of Genesis in the Bible. I have read a little ahead. I don't really know for sure what happens, and there's a chapter that I'll summarize instead of actually reading through, because it's just the genealogy of ancient elves, which is great and interesting. There is one, actually, I don't know if you would consider it a plot hole, but it is an interesting point that comes up in that chapter. So I'll show you what that is in a second. In the meantime, how is your day? Let me know if you can. If you can't, that's fine. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. But I hope it's good, whatever the case may be. I love this music playing in the background. I forget if I ever added anything to this screen. Looks like I did not. So unfortunately or fortunately, you'll just have to be satisfied with the sound of my voice and silence. In the meantime, you may be able to read here what I have presented. Chapter 4 in Genesis. We have a lot of information. If we take a look back, Adam became one of us, which I think is the royal we for God, to know good and evil. Not to know, see, that's the thing. I was thinking about this, right? When it was like they ate the apple, they gained knowledge of good and evil. That suggests to me that they knew of things that were perfectly neutral. They knew all of those things. The knowledge that they gained was of good and evil. I still think they weren't ashamed of being naked. I think they were cold, and because they were cold, they knew that the person whose voice they could hear, maybe not even talking, just simply existing, may be aware of the fact that they know that they're naked. Because being cold, generally, not good, in my opinion. Is it evil? Maybe not. But being warm and comfortable, that is good. So they learned of that, and they were naked. Chapter 4. Afterward, the man knew Eve, his wife, which conceived and bare Cain, and said, my favorite quote from this part of the Bible. Eve gives birth, and she says, I have obtained a man by the Lord, but I have obtained a man, my favorite thing. If somehow I ever give birth, that is what I'm going to say. It's going to be the first thing that comes out of my mouth after I go through that. I don't even know how to describe that. That seems so intense. That intense experience. If we go back to chapter 3, I will greatly increase thy sorrows and thy conceptions, which is interesting. Increase thy conceptions. I haven't thought of that. But anyway, yeah, sounds painful. If I ever do that, though, I'm going to try to remember I have obtained a man, my favorite quote so far. In the second sentence, it says, "And again, she brought forth his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground." Now, last time I was talking a lot about all of these notes on the bottom here, which I'm noticing you can't see my cursor. That actually might be kind of helpful. So I'm going to see if I can do anything about that. Show windows with empty names. Show window shadow. No, that is not an option there. Okay. Well, all of this stuff. Oh, you can see the highlighting. Oh, that's good. Okay. So all this stuff down here. The notes. I likened this to the Minecraft wiki system, where you read something. Like if we look, afterward the man knew Eve his wife, which conceived. We go to 4.1, note 1, which is down here. It says, "Man's nature, the estate of marriage, and God's blessing were not utterly abolished through sin, but the quality or condition thereof was changed," which I think is very interesting, that we are saying it's changed because there wasn't a whole lot of lore dropped for what it was to begin with. So I guess that's interesting. But sometimes, like up in this center section here, they have little references to other parts of the book, which is exactly how the Minecraft wiki works. You have hyperlinks that lead you to other articles and whatnot. The reason I mention this is if we continue with comparing the Bible to Minecraft, we have here Abel was a keeper of sheep. So Abel was getting wool. He was probably, I don't know, somebody was chopping down trees, must have been. It doesn't talk about that, even though that is one of the most important things in Minecraft. And Cain was a tiller of the ground. So Cain was a farmer. Abel was a sheep. Cain was born first, so he got to work first, which means they had wheat by the time they had sheep to keep. So basically, Abel was responsible for making beds, and Cain was responsible for making food. And then number 3, it says, "And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an oblation unto the Lord of the fruit of the ground." And if we look into that, 4:3:1, "This declareth that the Father instructed his children in the knowledge of God, and also how God gave them sacrifices to signify their salvation, albeit they were destitute of the sacrament of the tree of life." So basically, they were like, look what I did. Abel was a sheep. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. That's to sum it up. So they're like, okay, Cain's like, "Hey, look, I grew some wheat." The Lord God is like hanging out somewhere, I guess. Maybe this is another one of those things where it's not literal. Maybe it's metaphorical, metaphysical, perhaps. And he's not actually just kind of hanging out. But maybe he is. Not entirely sure. But Abel over here also himself brought of the first fruits of his sheep. Wool is what I'm thinking. And of the fat of them. So I guess he killed some of them. Or just borrowed it, I guess. I don't know if they have the technology for that. But maybe they did. "And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering." So this guy, I guess, the Lord is hanging out. Cain's over here. He's like, "Look, I got some wheat." His brother comes over with some wool and some fat of them, I guess. I don't know where he got that, but he has it. And the Lord's like, "Respect. I like that. I like that you have procured wool. We'll be able to make beds, and we'll be able to sleep through the night, protecting us from the creepers," or as they would say it, "those that creepeth," or something. I don't know. But on to Cain and to his offering, he had no regard, which is pretty severe of an opinion to have. No, I don't care. "Wherefore Cain was exceedingly wroth, and his countenance fell down." So the Lord's like, sheep? That's pretty dope. Wheat? Well, maybe he doesn't need it. So why would he care about it? Of course, that suggests he needs first fruits of his sheep, which I'm assuming is wool. I have no idea what a first fruit is. It's not the second fruit. I know that. What is the second fruit? I have no idea. And then Cain was disappointed. So Abel was a sheep, Cain was a wheat. Cain's sad because the Lord doesn't care about wheat, which is contrary to the experience of Minecraft, if I'm honest. Sheep are super important. But you either need a lot of sheep so you can get enough wool for a bed, or you need to find iron in order to get shears so that you can harvest the first fruits of the sheep without killing them. Although, I don't know about the fat. I guess he killed him anyway. Maybe they're just going out into a field and just hacking at stuff. I don't know. But Cain said, Then the Lord said to Cain, Why are you sad? Why is thy countenance cast down? Which is an interesting question. I'm wondering what the motivation for asking it is, right? Because if you, it's either like he's trying to bring attention to it, or he's like genuinely confused by it, which wouldn't make as much sense, but that could be the case. Maybe we'll keep reading. Maybe we'll find out. He continues. He says, If thou do well, shalt thou not be accepted? If thou dost not well, sin lieth at the door. Also unto thee his desire shall be subject, and thou shalt rule over him. So it's basically saying, if you do well, that's good. If you don't, well, I mean, that's not good, right? Which says to me that he must have made wheat poorly, right? Because he's saying if you do well, then you'll be accepted, which they have a note here. So if we go to 4:7 with the note 1, it says, Both thou and thy sacrifice shall be acceptable to me. Both you and your sacrifice, you and your wheat will be acceptable to me if you do well. But if you don't, I actually want to read note 2 here. So if we go down to 7, sin shall still torment thy conscience, which I guess I don't know, right? What is, I guess there's like a curse. Yeah, that must be it, right? The eternal curse of sin, I guess. I don't know. The eternal curse. Gifted to them from their parents who ate an apple. They're trying to free themselves from it. They're trying to absolve. They're trying to escape, maybe, another word we can throw in there. I guess the whole situation with firstborn dynamics kind of comes up here, but then God basically is like, why are you sad? Yeah, sure, I didn't really like what you came up with, but that's a you problem. There's something wrong with you. So you should think about that. Then Cain spake unto Abel his brother. So he spoke to his brother. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. So God's like, okay, so if you make wheat well, if you do a good job, then that's good. If you don't, you're going to live cursed forever. And then Cain was like, okay, well, I guess I'll kill my brother. Not a reasonable reaction. That is a dramatic escalation. Completely unnecessary. But apparently not, according to him. But then the Lord said unto Cain, which I guess is at another point, Where is Abel thy brother? Who answered, I cannot tell. Am I my brother's keeper? Which is a bold move to say to God, where you just killed your brother, and God's like, where's your brother? Where is he at these days? And then you're like, well, I don't know. Is it my job to know that? Yeah. And then God's like, what did you do? What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the earth, which is very intense imagery. I think it's supposed to be metaphorical, but let's for a second consider the implications of it being a literal description. This place is very different from our own experience of life, unless, of course, we're attributing an internal reaction to our environment to the environment itself, which is what people do all the time. With interpretations and the translations between realities and all that stuff. The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the earth. So I guess I'm getting this energy here where, like, God's basically like, I know the answer, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to say it. I'm going to give you an opportunity to consider the question rather than telling you the ending, which is you're in trouble now. And then this is one of my points of interest coming up here soon that I think is supports the self-propagating human theory. Now God's like, what did you do? His blood is crying to me. Then he says, now, therefore, thou art cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thine hand. In other words, yep, you messed up. You now have to carry that. And the earth is sad. You made the earth sad. When thou shalt till the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. Let's see. My friend says, I think God likes the sound of crying. Why else would he make women bleed every month when blood leaving the body cries to him? I don't know, actually. I feel like that's a question that I can't answer, but maybe we'll find an answer at some other point in the Bible. Maybe we'll keep that in mind. Does God like crying? Does he like it? He doesn't express an opinion at this point, does he? He just says, I recognize that sound, and you must have done something. What did you do? He doesn't say, I like it. He doesn't say, I don't like it. It just is a thing. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Now that I think about it, it's like he does express opinions on occasion, but when it comes to the cry of blood, he doesn't really have a strong opinion of that. It's just like it's like getting a notification to a Twitch stream. You know it's there, obviously. What is going on? There's one way to find out, but I don't think he's going to click on the blood. That would be weird. But anyway, Cain is cursed, and now he's even worse at farming. God calls him a vagabond and a runagate shalt thou be in the earth, which is interesting. I like that distinction, in the earth. It suggests the presence of elsewhere, or perhaps the presence of otherwise. But then Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear, which is pretty intense. I mean, yeah, he is a farmer. Like, he has a wheat farm. That is his thing. And now God's like, no, that's not going to work anymore. In fact, everybody's gonna not like you. So yeah. You killed your brother, first of all, weird thing to do, kind of awful. But also now you are going to be punished for it. And then Cain's like, that's a lot. I can't handle that. And then he's, I think this is him. Yeah, this is him continuing. Behold, thou hast cast me out this day from the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and shall be a vagabond and a runagate in the earth, and whosoever findeth me shall slay me. This is where we go back to the self-propagating human, which is separate from the demigod project. Because now we have the implication of a society, right? Because so far in the canon of the book, there's the suggestion of I meant to look up the word, but a self-propagating human and the demigod project. The demigod project ends in an eviction, which leads Adam and Eve back to Earth, or out of the garden and whatnot. And then Eve has Cain and Abel. So as far as the people spoken into canon, there's Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, and the maybe self-propagating human. If the self-propagating human actually was successful in finding fruit, they multiplied, creating a society. If that isn't the case, then Cain would not be concerned about being a vagabond and a renegade in the earth. He would not be concerned about whosoever findeth me shall slay me. He wouldn't be worried about that, right? He would simply be like, okay, well, I guess my parents aren't going to like me. I guess I'll go somewhere else. Unless, of course, he is an ancient elf and will live for centuries. And more people will be introduced in Chapter 5 specifically. So what I think is we have a few different potential realities here, and all of them are pretty weird, which is pretty nice. But then if we keep going to 15, it says, Then the Lord said unto him, Doubtless whosoever slayeth Cain, he shall be punished sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any man finding him should kill him. Which I think is fair, right? Because then when you curse someone forever and you're like, sin is a thing. In fact, sin is bad. Sin deserves punishment. And that's what you'll get if you do that. When you have someone representing sin, I think people refer to this as like, I don't know, some significant early sin, the murder of the brother thing. The Lord is like, yeah, actually, fair point. However, if anybody kills you, they're going to have it even worse, which I think is an interesting situation, because I don't know if anybody killed Cain, but people certainly have killed other people and killed the people who killed the people, and it keeps going. So how many punishments are we at now, these days? Let's see. And the Lord set a mark. I want to see what they say about the mark, because we're in 4:15, note 2, which is, here we are, which was some visible sign of the judgment that others should fear thereby. Some visible sign. My friend's been telling me about a TV show that has a Cain in it. I don't remember what they said about the visible sign, but apparently a lot of people have a lot of different ideas. And, TV shows and movies being a partially visual medium most of the time, it can get pretty interesting. There's a lot of flexibility there in the interpretation. But we go to 16. It says, Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod toward the east side of Eden. So he just left, basically. He's like, oh, I can't hang out here anymore, which then suggests, right, if he went out from the presence of the Lord, we have two potential interpretations here as well. One is the metaphysical thing where you're like, okay, I'm going to not live my life in accordance with the, well, how do you describe that at this point? The sensibilities of God, because he hasn't like set out any rules or anything. I think that happens in a later chapter or maybe a different book. I'm not sure, but he heads out. He goes somewhere else, somewhere which in the other interpretation is not in the presence of the Lord. So that could mean one of two things. Either Cain is diverging and experiencing the death that we were talking about last time, or the Lord is local. He's a local entity at this point. He's over there specifically, not here, the land of Nod toward the east side of Eden, over there. My friend says, I've seen this lore used in multiple shows. Since the Bible doesn't actually describe the mark of Cain, no one knows what it looks like, which is mentioned in each of them. So the mark is different in each one. Yeah. the I guess the benefit and kind of the drawback of a lack of specificity is the flexibility of interpretation. So while, a lot of this can be used towards a certain end, like I was watching a preacher talk about some scientific discovery that may or may not have been real. But he was bringing up this story specifically to perpetuate the narrative that is anti-abortion. So he was his main point was to manipulate you into agreeing with that by pulling at the things that you care about. But that's kind of like, that's what you can do with this kind of thing. It's like, this is just vague enough for there to be potentially multiple interpretations. So I can use that to my advantage to get you to think what I want. Happens all the time. I'm not trying to do that personally. I'm just reading a book and talking about the lore. My friend also says in Lucifer, which is a show, I think it's a circle in Supernatural, another show. It's like an F with an extra unattached limb, which is another, I guess that's another example, isn't it? Just vague enough to be interpreted in multiple ways. Because then I'm imagining like there's an F and then there's like an arm kind of floating off to the side, which would be hard to identify. How else could you interpret that? I'm going to get lost in that if I keep thinking about it. Okay, and then we get to the, the intimacy of the Bible, which is summarized as Cain also knew his wife, which conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city by the name of his son Enoch, which I think is great. You build a city, which I guess he did with his wife, unless there was already the self-propagating human. So we're actually following a demigod project lineage in the context of a greater society. But there's a note here. It's, a 1 over by the word city. So if we go to 4:17:1, it says, thinking thereby to be sure and to have less occasion to fear God's judgments against him. I guess maybe, I guess that's a good point, isn't it? Like, you can take even things that have straightforward definitions that represent simple ideas and say, well, it's not really that, is it? It's not really what you think it is. It's this other interpretation. All of it is not to be taken literally. I hear that all the time. And my question has always been to what degree? What is conceiving? What is bearing? What is a son? What is a city? What is building? What is anything? You can break everything down into its constituent parts, and you find at the source, everything is in some way arbitrary. So we make up whatever we want to get to the next moment without having an existential crisis constantly, which is nice, Most of us are successful most of the time, and that's pretty good. That's impressive, if anything. But anyway, we have a name here, Enoch. Let's try to remember that. And now we have just a bunch of people. All of this is kind of building the Lord. So we have Enoch generates Irad, who makes more and more people, who eventually leads down to Lamech, who has 2 wives, who have names, which is nice. So this guy has 2 wives who have names. However, the name of one it's emphasized here. It's in italics. So must have changed their name. That's an interpretation that I hadn't considered. Well, if we look at 19:1, it says, the lawful institution of marriage, which is that 2 should be one flesh, was corrupted in the house of Cain by Lamech, which I think is interesting. That also seems like an arbitrary line. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. Maybe what we're really getting at is that, this idea that the function of marriage is child production, and anything else is immoral, I guess, right? That's what we try to do, is try to turn all of this lore that we have into a conversation about morality. Because, we have words like punishment and, well, that's pretty much it. It was mostly just about punishment in this part of the Bible. I don't know if there's other stuff, but mostly this is just stories about people being punished. But yeah, Lamech over here, he has 2 wives. They have names. Ada has a kid who is the father of such as dwell in the tents and of such as have cattle. So I'm curious to know what father means, because we're kind of blending time across generations here. We're like many, many lifetimes pass as we get to the end of one sentence, which is interesting. Is it necessary? I don't know. But there's a lot of details that we don't get, right? I think this is also reminiscent or maybe reflective or representative of this this context, this social context. Because either Adam and Eve had a ton of children that we don't care about, or there was the self-replicating human who padded society with people that we don't care about, according to the focus of the Bible. All these other people, whatever. We just follow this one line, which I guess probably leads into the cultural phenomenon of inheritance, right? This kind of set the precedent for how we focus on significance through generations. You look at anything from, I guess, the financial inheritance in the context of families. You look at traditional systems of governance, like monarchies, for example. Those are inherited as well. All of this stuff. The precedent was in a very old story about a guy who had kids who lived in tents and have cows, which it's so interesting to me that we have like all of this, like we have this big world here and we have very limited knowledge of it. And we're not going to talk about like, if Irad had other people, had other kids. We're not going to talk about Irad's wife, because all of this is like through the context of the sons and the men. We talk about the women later, I think. I remember that coming up. But for now, they aren't important. Unless we're talking about how this one guy has 2 wives and how that's bad. Then we talk about the women, but only to name them. And, we have to say that this woman had the kid because now there's 2 of them. So we have to be more specific. So we're giving more narrative weight to the woman in the story in the context of them being immoral because of this guy. And it's his fault. I guess I don't know what it's all about, placing blame and punishment in this part of the book. So anyway, his kids have tents and cows, and his brother's name was Jubal, who was the father of all that play on the harp and organs. Organs being a musical instrument, as far as I understand, not actually like a kidney. I don't think that is the case. However, that would be very interesting. It'd be very different, to say the least. I guess Ada had 2 kids. One had, they had more kids, right? Either that or it's like the father of, like, the inventor of the idea of living in a tent, for example, I guess, or the idea of having a cow. I don't know. It's, again, if you start breaking down, like, what is literal and what isn't, you can get into very, very small pockets of, like, reflection and rumination even. which I guess is part of the design, isn't it? They want you to think about this. They want you to focus and to be slightly confused. But at the same time, I'm not entirely sure that was the intention. I feel like that was just a consequence because the person who wrote these ideas down, or the people who wrote these ideas down, were trying to summarize the totality of human history up to a certain point while just grabbing like important little details. So far, it's focusing on what not to do. Don't eat the fruit. Don't kill your brother. Don't have 2 wives. Don't be a woman, I think is also one of them, right? Otherwise, you'll be sad and you'll be a child producer. So yeah, don't do those things. And then you can sacrifice to earn redemption is what I'm getting. An interesting system. Okay, so back to the tents and the cows and the harps and the organs. Zillah, which was the other of the 2 wives, had kids as well. Tubal Cain, who wrought cunningly every craft of brass and of iron. So he was a metal worker. And he had a sister. I don't know if the sister comes back into the story, but we'll keep an eye out for that. But then this guy, right, freaking Lamech over here, said unto his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, my wives. Pay attention to what I say. For I would slay a man in my wound, and a young man to mine hurt. There's a note here. I'm going to summarize this whole story real quick and talk about how all of this is like interesting but kind of irrelevant. So we go to 23. It says, his wives, seeing that all men hated him for his cruelty, were afraid. Therefore he braggeth that there is none so lusty that were able to resist, although he were already wounded. Which I don't think is actually wounded. I feel like that's something weird, something else. But anyway, he's basically like, you know what? Everybody hates me. I have 2 wives. They're right to hate me. I would kill him if I could. So basically, this is an opinion expressed by the author, I guess. If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, which is a band, truly Lamech 70 times 7-fold. So if we go to the note here in 24, it says, he mocked at God's sufferance in Cain, jesting as though God would suffer none to punish him and yet give him license to murder others, which suggests to me that he's talking about himself once again in the third person, which could have been a social convention at that point. So he's like, if Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, truly I would be 70 times that, which is strange. So basically, this guy was weird. The fact that he had 2 wives, maybe not the weirdest thing about him. You know, that's what I'm getting, because the wives seem, I don't know, I guess given the standard of the depiction of women in the Bible so far, they seem like they exist because they had kids. So that's why we talk about them, because they produced children. Then Lamech's just weird. He's just a weird guy. He's really just rude and kind of awful. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'm really bad. Generally, I'm just really bad. I would kill someone. Then I guess he just wants to be punished. I don't know. Which, you know, there's a time and place for that, I'm told. But threatening to kill people, probably not socially acceptable in any regard. At least not in my circles. But here we go. Number 25. It says, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and she called his name Seth. For God said, she hath appointed me another seed for Abel, because Cain slew him. So this is what I'm thinking, right? Because we get into the genealogy in the next part, but it doesn't actually mention lifetimes, like lifespans at this point. So when you're first reading through this as if it's a cohesive narrative to be told from the beginning, which it tries to be as far as I can tell. But then again, I've only read the beginning. All of a sudden, all of these generations have passed. All of these people, this city, all of these stories have unfolded. And then a long time later, Adam's like, okay, let's have another kid. And they make Seth, I guess, because Cain killed his brother. It makes sense. You know, if your son kills your other son, probably going to be a grieving period. Definitely reasonable to wait multiple generations. Although they were having kids pretty early on. At that point in the society that we are aware of, however, in the genealogy chapter, you'll understand the scope. We'll get to that in just a second. My friend says, I used to listen to Avenged Sevenfold all the time and never had any idea that the name might be a Bible reference. Yeah, surprise. It is. It is indeed. 4:24 of Genesis. That is the quote. And it's Lamech just being an asshole, basically. He's just being a jerk. He has 2 wives, but, you know, they make babies, so they are women. It's the depiction so far, I guess. This is what the Bible says. Okay. And then to the name Seth, also there was born a son, and he called his name Enosh. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord, which is interesting. So the grandson of Adam and Eve invented, 26, in these days God began to move the hearts of the godly to restore religion, which a long time by the wicked had been suppressed. So by the time Adam and Eve were grandparents again, religion was a thing, and so much time had passed that everyone was sad, I guess. That's kind of the read that I'm getting. Like, if you don't have religion, then you're sad, and you are living in sin, and you need to sacrifice either your sheep or your wool or their fat or your wheat, but it better be good wheat. It can't be bad wheat, because then you'll just be more sad. And then we get into chapter 5 here in the Bible. The genealogy, it says. I'm not going to read through this. I'm just going to read a couple things and then give you an idea of what is going on. So I need to look at one more thing. Okay, so that's through Cain. All right, so here we go. I'll read the first part here. It says, this is the book of generations of Adam. Not Adam and Eve. It's just Adam. Adam owns the generations because Adam is the man. In the day that God created Adam, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day that they were created. The story that we already read. That's basically what it's summarizing. Really focusing on Adam specifically, which is probably why people have been doing that. An interesting thing to do. Number 3, it says, now Adam lived 130 years and begat a child in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. So, question, right? Because we don't actually know, right? If we look back here, we have the canonization of the mechanism of procreation, where the man knew his wife, which conceived, which I'm guessing is the act conceived. Otherwise, it would be who conceived. So, or maybe his wife is a witch, not like the spooky kind or the really interesting kind, but the object kind, you know, instead of who conceived, which conceived. I'm thinking it must be in reference to his wife, because then his wife says my favorite quote, I have obtained a man. which I don't know why I love that so much. I just think it's hilarious. Okay, so the canonization of that, but then we get down here, and Adam, 130 years old, begat a child in his own likeness after his image. So this is in reference to Seth. So Cain and Abel, separate thing. We do that before we're 130 years. That's like the first round. We figure it out. We work out the kinks. And then we get into the genealogy, and Seth is the one that makes it. Let's see here. So Seth, if we go back and look at this some more, it does say, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and she called his name Seth. So Eve is the one, even though she's not named here again. She isn't given that visibility. She is the one who is giving birth to these kids. So women are sad because they have to give birth, or they're sad and also they have to give birth. Let's see. So that leads to Seth. But then when we talk about genealogy, Adam is the one doing this in his own likeness after his image and calling him Seth. If we go up here, Eve called his name Seth. That's what it says right here. And she called his name Seth. So in the part where it's like a little more detail, a little less, inheritance based, a little less genealogy kind of thing, Eve, unnamed, gives birth and names the child. She did specifically. But when we get to the genealogy chapter, Adam is doing all of this and naming him. Interesting. So in 4, it says, and the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. That is the format for the rest of the chapter. That's how it works. So we talk about who this person is. We talk about the important people that they make. We ignore all the others. And we talk about how long it was before they had kids. And then we talk about how long they lived afterward and what they were up to, which, spoiler alert, is making kids. A lot of those. And then we don't even get like stories of what it's like to be a child in the genealogy chapter, which makes sense. That's enough to try to summarize the genealogy of ancient elves, because this guy's living for how long? Was 930 years before they die? Well, most of them anyway. One is a little weird. But then we get into Seth, who had kids, and he died. Then his kid, who had kids, and he died. And his kid, who had kids, and he died. And his kid, who had kids, and he died. And his kid, who had kids, and he died. But then his kid, watch this, also Enoch, which is the name of that kid I mentioned, lived 65 years and begat another one, yet another kid. And Enoch walked with God after he begat his son 300 years and begat sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was no more seen, for God took him away. This is the thing I was mentioning earlier, right? Where there's just like, is it a plot hole? Is it a mystery? Why is it there? What is the significance? Another point where, like, that whole you'll always have questions comes in. It's interesting. We take a break. We mention his kid, but then he's just gone. If we look at the note that comes with this, right, it's 524, right? If we go down to 524, to show that there was a better life prepared, and to be a testimony of the immortality of souls and bodies, as to inquire where he became is mere curiosity. So Enoch transcended. Enoch transcended without dying. He just became. He just is somewhere else. He is no longer seen. I don't know why they don't have a note for what seen means. Maybe nobody knows. but he's gone now. But his kid, he lived, he had kids, he died, his kid lived, he had kids. And that's when we get to Noah. So we have another Lamech. I don't think it's the same guy. I think it's somebody else. The same name. He called his son Noah, saying, "This same shall comfort us concerning our work and sorrow of our hands, as touching the earth which the Lord hath cursed." And then Lamech lived, and he died, and Noah was 500 years old, and he had kids. So he had kids when he was 500 years old, which is, if we look back later in life, then all of the other ancient elves had kids. Elves being in reference to the fact that they're living centuries. God changes his mind on that a little later, which, of course, we have to get from this period to our current day, where we are not living for 900 years in a way that we remember, if at all. So yeah, Enoch, what happened? Nobody knows. Not even this book knows. It's just curious. Are there works of art? Are there works of literature that explore this? Maybe. I don't know what they are. I didn't know about this story until like a couple weeks ago. Absolutely wild stuff. So yeah, genealogy. A bunch of people lived for a very long time. They had a lot of kids. We only care about a few of them. And we find out why we talked about some of them at all when we get to Noah. Noah is the protagonist, I guess, of the next chapter. When we get to chapter 6, we get to the story. It says here, God threateneth to bring the flood. He threatens, he's like, I'm going to flood you. I'm going to flood the world. And, well, Noah and his ark, a recognizable story. Let's see what the Bible says about it. Maybe we'll gain some insight. Chapter 6. So when men began to be multiplied upon the earth, and there were daughters born unto them, then the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all that they liked. Interesting. So we have yet again the canonization of... actually, let's see, because there's a note here on the word liked, which I am interested in. So 6:2, number 4. It says, or had chosen. Okay, well, I guess romance isn't a thing, right? None of this sounds romantic. It just sounds like child production. I don't know if romance was a thing. I don't have any evidence of it, right? There's just the function of marriage is child production, and we only care about the sons, except in chapter 6 when we talk about the daughters, who are the objects of the sons' interest. I was going to say affection, but that's not really what it says, is it? They just saw that they were pretty and married them. Okay. Therefore, the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, because he is but flesh, not but flesh, but flesh. And his days shall be 120 years. So at this point, when people were just engaging in child production, in the context of marriage, that one guy having 2 wives way back in the day being an asshole, whatever happened to him. We have number 3, always strive. Okay, so the book here says, because man could not be won by God's lenity, I guess, and long sufferance, whereby he strove to overcome him, he would no longer stay his vengeance. So I guess what that is saying to me, all of this is an interpretation. I'm just saying words. The Lord said, yeah, you're going to die sooner now. You're not as interesting, I guess, or not as important, not as powerful. Maybe you're getting a little too confident. Maybe you are having a little too much power. Maybe I take away your lifespan. Maybe we turn you into something closer to the modern human. 120 years. Then we get into chapter 4. This is like a massive lore drop right here, or number 4 in chapter 6. It says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, yea, and after that the sons of God came unto the daughters of men," a weird way to word that, "and they had borne them children. These were mighty men, which in old time were men of renown." So there were giants in the earth in those days. And after that, okay, so what is that in reference to? There's a note here, so I'm curious to see what it says. Or tyrants. Interesting. Or. So giants being not in reference to size, even though I prefer that interpretation. You know, maybe the self-replicating human found a special fruit that makes them taller. I guess I'm 6'5". To someone, I'm a giant. And then, yeah, it's just a bunch of child production. That's really the main thing. Punishment and making babies, which I guess is probably why I've heard a lot of stories recently, because I've been talking about this whole conversation series with my friends and stuff. And they're basically like, I tried to read that, but I couldn't stick with it. I couldn't get into it. It was just weird and confusing. There is, I think that's valid. I think that's a valid reaction, a valid interpretation, because it's just about being sad, and that's kind of the main thing. Then there was that one asshole who was like, "What are you going to do about it?" He happened to have 2 wives. So more kids, a lot of kids. When the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and all the imaginations of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. We have an A here, which is a reference to a later part in this book. Spoilers once again. So I guess millennia later, right? Centuries later, perhaps. I'm not doing the math. The Lord looks at everything as like, these people are actually kind of wicked. They're kind of, their imaginations are only evil continually. They're not coming up with good ideas. They took the knowledge of good and evil, and they're like, they really like the evil stuff, don't they? And that's not good. So then it repented the Lord that he had made man in the earth, and he was sorry in his heart. Which is that's a pretty brutal thing, isn't it? For someone to look at your existence and be disappointed, to apologize for you existing altogether. Brutal. I don't really know how anyone could survive that. That's really intense. But maybe that's why everyone wants to apologize, right? That is what it is, right? Getting absolving of your sins is apologizing when you ask for forgiveness, right? That's kind of the main thing. Obviously, I mean, if the Lord is God and creator of everything, and he's sorry that you exist, yeah, you're going to be influenced to apologize. You're going to want to do that. Especially if, spoilers again, the only way to get into heaven is to apologize. Then you have ample motivation to do that. But then the Lord said, "I will destroy from the earth the man whom I have created. From man to beast to the creeping thing," creepers gone, finally, "and to the fowl of the heaven, the chicken angels once again, for I repent that I have made them." I understand being sad about the creepers. Very bad idea. I don't know what led to that whole phenomenon. Very popular. Everybody knows about it, but still. And then the chicken angels, he's just mad about them because of people having children and being confident, and I guess evil, right? Just being evil. Yeah. So I guess really the message here is don't be evil, or else God will be sad. And he'll, destroy from the earth the man. So you don't want to do that. Don't be evil. You will be destroyed from the earth. Maybe not. Well, actually, that's very specific, isn't it? Which suggests that you may not be destroyed from everything, but there's no canon alternative, is there? There's just the earth. There's the garden. There's the heaven as separate from the earth. There's the ocean, I guess. And there was a note here that suggests the establishment of an eternal soul, which I didn't really get, but probably somebody who read a later chapter went back and added a note, kind of like what I was doing to validate my theory of the self-replicating human, which was separate from the demigod project. That's probably what it is. Let's see. So they're evil. He's sad. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. But Noah's different. Noah is less bad, if bad at all. He's pretty good. And then we go back to genealogy. It says, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just and upright man in his time, and Noah walked with God. Okay. Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, I guess. The earth also was corrupt before God, for the earth was filled with cruelty. There's plenty of cruelty going on, and I wonder... That's kind of the tough thing with it, isn't it? Because it's like this part where it's talking about, where it's directly relating or tying the concept of evil to the consequence of punishment. There aren't details specifying the nature of this evil, which leaves it open to a lot of interpretation. Or it's expounded upon at a later point in the Bible. But I know more people who have read this part and not the later part of the Bible than I know people who have read this part and the later part of the Bible. So there's a lot of room for interpretation and stuff like this, which leads to contrast, it leads to disagreement, leads to radicalization. Whoever heard a religious person as being a radical, that is what that is. Noah was a just and upright man in his time, and Noah walked with God. So he was pretty chill. He was pretty cool. He was nice. He was a good guy. He had some sons, but also the earth was terrible and filled with cruelty. Then God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. Well, that's okay. Redundant, I guess. Or maybe, okay, so he didn't look at it, and then he looked at it and saw the truth. I guess that's what we're getting. That's kind of, this is the second time this has come up so far. It's like God has this power of like ultimate perception, to know the truth, simply looking upon it, looking in its direction. It is known. And then it elaborates. It says, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. All of it, even the angel chickens, were corrupt. And God said unto Noah, an end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with cruelty through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Oh boy, what do you do when you hear that? You're just like, okay, well, I guess that's it then, isn't it? The end of all flesh is come before me, which I think is, I don't really like how that's worded, because it takes the just interpreting the wording as it's presented and as I'm seeing it with the definitions that I have. It seems like kind of taking the burden of the decision away from the speaker. It's like this end has come before me. It has arrived. It doesn't say it's basically like validating the decision before delivering the decision. Everything is ending, and so I will end it, is basically how you can read that as well, which seems pretty intense. But this is also what he says. He continues, he's like, make thee an ark of pine trees. Thou shalt make cabins in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. Very specific. Useful, though, because if you don't pitch it with pitch, you could pitch it with anything, which might not work as well. So he's like, go make an ark, build a ship out of pine trees. Go do that. And thus shalt thou make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. Which is cool. 3 dimensions. We know 3 dimensions exist at this point. At least 3 dimensions. In fact, it could be that everything was 4-dimensional. And to survive the destruction of the world, he had to specify that we're only using 3 dimensions going forward. That's a reading, an interpretation. I do like that one, actually. The idea that in the beginning, in the Christian Bible, everything was in 4 dimensions, at least. Either that or everything was in 2 dimensions, right? Because you still have up and down. We didn't really have depth. It was all like in relation to each other geometrically. Like we assume it's in 3 dimensions, but now we have proof that 3 dimensions are used when we come to the ark. So maybe Noah made an exodus from the 4th dimension to the 3rd by following the instructions of God. I don't know. But, we have more information about the ark. It says, a window shalt thou make in the ark. It says, my friend says, the 4th dimension extends life. Well, it could. Although I guess it didn't say earlier when it was like, up here it says, but because he is but flesh, not but flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. That's just what it says. And it doesn't really continue this conversation of time. The Bible is not really chronological in its wording. So it could be all of this happened immediately. And he decided that it'll be 120 years. And then immediately decided to exit the 4th dimension. That is an interpretation. I don't know. But there's going to be a window. And in a cubit thou shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof. Thou shalt make it with the low 2nd and 3rd room. I said it like that because there's italics on that word. And I, behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life under heaven. All that is in the earth shall perish. Which is a wild thing. Obviously, it's impressive that Noah made this thing, but it also makes sense. If you're talking to God and God's like, I'm going to destroy everything, listen closely. You need to make this thing exactly this way. You're going to pay attention, provided you can recover from the shock of it all. Unless, of course, you agree with that decision, where you're like, okay, fair point. Yeah, let's destroy everything. Then you're not going to be as shocked, in interpretation. God continues. He says, but with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt go into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee. So gather up your family, go into the ark. You're going to the 3rd dimension. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou cause to come into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Make sure that they can have kids. We need to maintain kid production. We need to have that. All of the living things, make sure they can have kids. And also make sure you can feed them. Of the fowls after their kind, and of the cattle after their kind, and of every creeping thing. So creepers do still exist. Of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, and thou mayest keep them alive. Okay, so I just had a thought, right? It says, and of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou cause to come into the ark. What that brings to mind, because I keep likening this back to Minecraft, right? It's like you have to grow carrots, you have to grow wheat, You have to grow all of these, like everything that you can use to lead all of the creatures. You have to have that, because you have to get them to come into the ark. But then it says, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, and that thou mayest keep them alive. So then I guess that suggests that they're going to arrive. Maybe between now and the last sentence, I changed my mind. Having you go catch them probably would be a lot of work. And take thou with thee of all meat that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, that it may be meat for thee and for them. Okay, so that says, right, it's like, look, make sure you have food, because you are not eating these animals. You eat these animals, they can't have babies. We need them to have babies. They need to be alive. They need to survive this thing that I'm doing. We're going to the 3rd dimension. Let's see. Noah therefore did according unto all that God commanded him, even so did he. Yeah, fair. If God's like, I'm destroying the earth and every living thing on it, but if you build this 3-dimensional boat, you can go ahead and survive with your family. My friend says maybe God brought them to the vicinity of the ark and Noah had to lead them onto it. That could be it. Yeah. It's just like that makes sense. They're gonna show up, and then you got to get them up there. Why draw the line there? I don't know. Maybe to preserve this conversation of free will, right? Because we haven't actually established in very direct terms the existence of free will, but it's implied by God seeming to be confused or surprised by these things. So I guess from that we can assume that these people all made decisions and were able to. Suppose the animals were as well up to a point, right? So they were instructed maybe, or convinced, or maybe even controlled to go there, but then they were let go from that influence, I guess. I don't know. There are a lot of ways to look at it. Very unspecific in very certain circumstances. There being 3 dimensions, very specific. So that is chapters 5 and 6. It's been an hour and 14 minutes. I'm going to drink some water. Maybe we can take a quick break, listen to the song that I made, and then maybe we'll read what happens in chapter 7. Maybe I'll come back. Thank you for existing, because genuinely, thank you. I deeply appreciate you. I cannot overstate that. I can't, and I'm pretty good with words, I like to think. Maybe I'll mention a couple other things. I don't know. Depends on how I feel. But yeah, let's take a quick break. Get yourself some water. Do whatever you need to do. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. At the end of my song, I like that song. It's got my voice in it, just me doing that little choir thing at the end. I wasn't really sure what song to use for this whole streaming thing. I figured something pretty chill would be nice because I've just been streaming for days and I am very tired. That said, I am really interested in this next chapter. And, I've already set up the dramatic tension of God deciding to destroy the earth. From the earth, the man. Speaking of which, I have obtained a man. My favorite quote. It is so funny to me, specifically. I don't know why. It's very interesting to me that things are funny to me sometimes. A sense of humor. Very curious. I don't know. Do we want to keep reading about Noah? I have 3 of my friends here who are just hanging out. Somebody stopped by for a little bit earlier, I think. I look at it every now and then, just because I'm interested. Anybody have an opinion? I could read you something that I've written, which I think would be fun to do. Noah is funny. Yeah. I have I know a Noah, and he's pretty chill too. So it's pretty cool. It's a good name. I like it. Let's see here. How long is chapter 7? It's not too long. Well, I say that, but a lot can happen in a sentence in this book. It actually looks like the story doesn't end until... Ooh, the story goes on for a while, doesn't it? Yeah, all the way through 10. And then we get into some other stuff with 11. Actually, 10 is like a transitional chapter too. Maybe we start with that next time, We have our exodus into the 3rd dimension prepared. We have everything set up. We've got the story prepped. The next thing that we do is we talk about where do we go from here? Now that we have built this 3-dimensional ship, now that we are ready for things to be on it, the baby producing creatures, maybe we get into that next time, because that sounds like it's going to be pretty wild. How do you manage that many animals? How do you manage all of that? I have no idea. So how about I go over here to my full cam. You can see my full face. And after reading all of this Bible stuff, and God said unto Noah, an end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with cruelty through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Very sad stuff. We're talking about punishment. We're talking about sadness. We're disregarding the significance of women in the context of, everything specifically, but also just familial structures, if we wanted to go into that. Why don't I read you something that I've written? Something a little different from the Bible, something a little nicer. I can just pull that up real quick if you wanted to listen. Totally up to you. There's a lot of things you could be doing. I see one person has decided to go elsewhere, or maybe is having problems with Twitch, or maybe anything. These numbers are not very informative. Why don't I read the beginning of my book, The Gravity of Gravity? I'll read that. And then, I don't know, do we compare it to the Bible? We compare everything to everything in every waking moment. Let's just see how it feels, how it sounds. I want to actually, now that we're here with the full cam, I think what I'm going to do is mute the music and read it to you. This is the beginning of The Gravity of Gravity, the book that I'm writing, which is about social revolution, basically. Abolishing the capitalist paradigm. Not abolishing capitalism, but the capitalist paradigm. This is how it begins. Feeling as if there is no ground, no air, no light, only gravity pulling me down, somewhere deep, somewhere half-remembered, endless. Then I stand on nothing, on a stage between the stars, staring into the source itself. But the source of what? I forget the question when I'm asked another. Astrea Kai, are you listening? Professor Taylor didn't normally collapse physical reality in its totality, forcing it into merely the window that is a lecture room, nor did I typically get consumed by the diminishing until I didn't, so the question seemed out of place. I need you to hear this, he said, his gaze illuminating both my presence and something beyond the folding walls of this hall. I look and see a familiar yet strange sight, the void, something at the center of everything and yet beyond its boundary. It can be terrifying if you forget it doesn't have to be, that you are its creator. The void whispers, remember what we are. And instead, I remember I forgot I wasn't where I was a moment ago when I fell asleep. What are we? I asked the void. Remember. When you see it, remember, said the void. That isn't very clear, I suggested to the void. When you see it, you will be, said the void. What does that mean? I asked, attempting to gain a sense of clarity from the void. Seek illumination, and it will always find you, said the void. I didn't get to ask any more questions because the void was no longer the void, but the ubiquitous and indomitable interconnectedness of the fabric of reality, though, if pressed, I might say it looked a bit like a pillow writing a poem dedicated to the head laying upon it, thinking it's asleep. Then, a similar feeling as the first, except the opposite, and that didn't make sense given my seeing the spectrograph of a living planet's atmosphere, until I realized I had woken up and was floating a bit above my bed, until I wasn't. That's the beginning of The Gravity of Gravity, in case you were wondering. The book that I'm writing, which is available for free on Patreon. I would appreciate help surviving the crucible of capitalism. It's optional. Everything that I have on there you can access. You just have to sign up, I guess, which you can do for free. I don't know if people talk about that, really, because usually when somebody mentions a Patreon, it's like, come support me and you get stuff. But you can check it out for free. You can also actually buy the whole book and every chapter that I've yet to write for a flat fee if you wanted to support me that way. It's all there on patreon.com/Darian Thomas, which is DARRIAN THOMAS. Of course, if I am interpreting my situation correctly, the people currently listening to that message are already signed up. That may not be the case. If you want to check out the rest of The Gravity of Gravity and the experience of my writing something, which is essentially gravity pauses in the future for 2 seconds, and humanity has to recover from that event to figure out what happens next, to explore the unknown, and they actually do it. They actually do it pretty well, because by then they figured out a lot of things with the help of AI systems and a shift towards sustainability and inclusion. Chapter 4 is what I'm working on now. In Chapter 4, Astrea Kai walks down the street to a government building to receive emergency supplies. That doesn't sound very interesting, but believe me, it is. It certainly will be, and it's going to take a lot of work. If you want to hear a funny story, real quick, I included in chapter 1 actually a bit of like slang in the future, where during the gravity event, Astrea Kai's neighbor was getting a haircut, and the haircut, I'm imagining like a trimmer or something, didn't go where it was supposed to because gravity paused, and the haircut did not turn out as expected, and Ellie described it as a buggy mod. I figured, in the future, today, people who are inventing language are doing so in the context of digital media, of specifically games, which is only confirmed by an experience I had the other night in the bathroom of a restaurant. I heard there was a bunch of kids going in, being kids, loud and kind of silly, just ridiculous. And 2 of them were participating in a contest of sorts, a contest of intimidation. They were inventing threats for each other. in a joking way. I could tell neither of them were taking it seriously. Thankfully, that's a dangerous thing to do. But one of them was talking about, I don't know, executing some maneuver against the other, referencing the scope of their hitbox, which portrayed them as an easy target, which I just thought it was hilarious. No, I don't remember exactly what they said. I was kind of paying attention, but I was also, I was in a bathroom. I was busy washing my hands at the time, which was noisy. But anyway, a buggy mod. That's going to come up. We're actually going to hear Ellie talk. So if you want to hear what people in a speculative future written by a gamer is all like, I'm going to try to come up with something interesting. But mostly it's going to be sustainability and inclusion. So it's going to be easy to walk down the street. It's going to be easy to access the building. There's going to be a pretty diverse cast, a lot of different conversations, and a lot of reactions. Because as we follow Estrella Kai, she seems to be handling it really well. She seems to be pretty chill. But then we see how other people are taking it. Overall, no worldwide riots. It's not a post-apocalyptic story. It's not a dystopian kind of thing. It's genuinely what would happen if humanity was fine, even if gravity paused. What would it take to get there? And what could we do to get to that point? So if a total paradigm shift, the abolishment of the capitalist paradigm, if any of that seems interesting to you, patreon.com. I just released chapter 3 and I'll be releasing chapter 4. Honestly, I'll probably finish it in a day and then edit it the next day and then put it up 4 days after that. Who knows? But you can get access to the book. You can get access to everything else I have on there. I have a lot of stuff going on. All that said, it's enough reading from me today. Tomorrow, I am doing other work. Tuesday, I'm doing other work. Wednesday, I might just stream Starfield. I've been really enjoying that. It's my favorite game, so I might do more of it. But I'm definitely going to be back on Thursday, working more on A Drop Becomes the Ocean, an EDM piece where we introduce the fabric of reality to the discrete perspective. On Friday, I am going to be investigating and reacting to the most recent presidential debate. I've invited a lot of people, very curious to learn about it. I'm not going to be taking sides, really. I'm just going to be talking about why are we debating and not collaborating through the vector of conversation? Why is everything adversarial? Why are we doing this? That kind of thing. Bringing my perspective into the political realm, which I haven't done yet in a external, tangible way. I have my own thoughts, of course. And then on Saturday, more Starfield. Am I going to deal with the toilet milk paradox? Probably. This Saturday. I think that would be a good time for it. Next Sunday, we'll be back here. We're going to get into the story of Noah, see what it's like leaving the fourth dimension to enter the third. And along the way, if you all want to stay tuned, following me on Twitch is great. I have a link on my profile where you can get access to all this stuff. I'm going to be putting this on YouTube too. So if you're over there watching this, same thing. Link is in my my about section. I'm going to redo it, so it'll make more sense. But yeah, outside of that, thank you for existing. Genuinely. I am so deeply grateful to coincide with you. And I look forward to our next conversation. I'm really excited. Thank you again.